Welcome everyone to Politically High Tech with your host Elias. This is going to be a tech kind of episode. You know how I love to dive into AI and how we humans should just be prepared, upgrade our way of thinking on the how and what. And this is what we're going to do, especially with data analytics. I have a very fine guest who's going to do that. Okay. So don't listen to me. Well, don't listen to me too, just don't ignore me completely. Now I'm asking that, but it comes to just advice on AI analytics, I'm just a learner just like you. Definitely listen to Kevin Hanegan here. And he's going to introduce himself. He's going to tell you his background, whatever you need to know, really, because I think the guests could introduce themselves better than I can. Doesn't matter how good I research, there's always going to be something I'm going to miss, or so I'm just not going to do that. So just to prevent me from rambling, going long-winded, Kevin, take it away. Introduce yourself to our viewers slash listeners.
Yeah, hi everyone out there to the listeners. I appreciate it. So, as you said, my name is Kevin Hanegan. Been in data and analytics for about 20 years in different roles: contracting, education, learning, chief learning officer at a data and analytics company. And I teach about data, the psychology of how we use data and artificial intelligence at a couple universities, wrote a couple books. Long story short, I just love talking about data, the skills required, AI, and how it's going to help us.
Yeah, because all I know is some people are still very fearful of this AI. I always say maintain cautious optimism because
Yes.
technological disruption, I know to some of you listeners, I'm going to sound like a broken record or a parakeet, but they are going to happen. And this won't be the last one. Maybe holograms will be the next thing that disrupts it in a few years. These are happening just much more often because technological evolution is just happening much quicker and in such a precedented way rate. Can it be overwhelming at times? Yeah, I get it. I'm pretty empathetic. Sometimes I do feel overwhelmed myself. But if you don't adapt, let's be clear. This is when you're gonna fear about losing your job. If you don't adapt, try to learn new things, then you could legitimately fear about losing your job. But try to learn, go day by day with it. That's all I'm gonna say to that. So I think the very good question to start is, what is data literacy and why everyone should have at least a basic understanding?
Yep. Great question. I'll start by saying I don't want to freak the listeners out because this, the word data literacy, the first word is data. Usually there's a good population of people that are like, data, okay, time out, I'm done. Not for me. I was an English history major. It's different now. We're not talking about math. We're not talking about statistics. So data literacy is just like you read a book. And as you're reading a book, the way the author writes it, your reading comprehension is you're interpreting the context, you're conveying the meaning, you're listening to what the author is trying to tell you, even if they're not telling you directly. Data literacy is the same thing, but now in front of you are visualizations and their numbers and their charts, and there's not you're not doing math, but you might see a number like 52% of this population is doing this. Your comprehension, it seems like to everyone, it'd be easy. Okay, in math, I learned 2 + 2 is 4. But what's missing when you just see the numbers, you don't understand the context. You don't understand the story around it. You have the author weaving the narrative like you do in a book. So data literacy is the way that anyone, not a mathematician, not a statistician, but anyone in the world today can see information, because data and information are very similar, and be able to question it to understand what it means to help you make better decisions.
Yeah, that is a very good, succinct, clear, concise answer. Just how, yeah, data is very narrative driven. It even creates a story into itself. So, I mean, historians, if you're allergic to data, you should not be in history. History needs data. That's just my pet peeve. I'm an unofficial historian. I love data. I'm probably the oddball, but I'm proud of it at this point because I always had a good fundamental understanding how to interpret data. But with mass data, macro data, it could be overwhelming even for some professionals. And you see here, this is probably, I'm gonna do a little quick duck.
Yeah.
This is the simple
charts.
version of data with charts and all that. And there's a lot more visualization going on. We had to create the narrative that could connect at least most of these data sets together. And a lot of jobs are doing it is how they come with much better, much more informed decisions. Even if it ends up being a mistake, they justify, hey, this is what we was operating based, out of, instead of just, oh, we just like that date, we just like data 1 and data 4 because it just looks simple, convenient for us to work around. While we ignoring 2 and 3, that could tell us critical information, it could tell us how to change, what to focus on, how to improve the product, or even how to improve services. It's like, I know because this is one of my it's not secret anymore, secondary backgrounds. Besides history is one of my primary study. So I don't want to bore you with all the details, but there's a lot more software doing this. And I know one Microsoft software has done it, and I think it has done a decent job. Microsoft,
Power BI. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really just creates nice visuals. All I gotta do is enter just a data set. But just because it's beautiful, some people still be confused, oh, it looks nice and stuff, but don't worry. Once you get it, once you get used to it, once you really get into the easy breakdown, like these dummy charts I got behind me, these are not real. It's just a nice background. This will make me look very analytical. I'm not that analytical. At least sometimes I'm not. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. So I think that's very good. Because people are just afraid of too much information. I'm just one of those people who was just really just to shove things down my brain and to damage myself with it instead of just running away from stuff. That's just me when I have a hard challenge. So I think we got to get to the psychology of it because a lot of it's very psychological.
Absolutely.
I'm sure most people could, so once they get past that fear or whatever preconceived notion got data, just like you said, statistician, mathematician. I gotta be into that stuff. Well, my major was literacy for children. Well, you're still gonna need some data. Mm-hmm. What type of genres would attract male students as opposed to female students, or vice versa? Okay, you wanna read about family stories to one set of population, or you want to focus on more non-fiction stories. That'll be one example of that. Data still needed. Data still needed. I don't want to sound like I'm advocating for data, but it's needed. Just about all companies use it. I don't know which ones doesn't.
Probably not the good ones.
Yeah, the ones that died, apparently.
Yeah.
Even some of those, they got overwhelmed. They let the fear and self-negativity cloud them. So how does our brain make decisions based on data? I think we could continue from there.
Yeah. So think of the brain as a computer, just for like an analogy, right? You have the memory is like your long-term memory. So when things are stored in the computer, think of it as like a database with things being stored. So we are exposed as humans to, some studies show like 11 million different senses at any point in time. If you think of everything that's around you, think about that as a computer. If you're processing that much and then trying to analyze it unconsciously and do something, your brain is going to overheat. There's not a fan big enough to do that. And we'd be sleeping 30 hours a day. It just wouldn't work. So everything that's coming into us, the brain eventually will take pieces of it, try to apply it just like in a database. It's going to look for relative patterns and it's going to save them. So it's going to look for experiences. It's going to find previous experiences and try to store it in your memory. But what's really interesting is it can't process all of that. So it filters out things. And this is the first key point, is where we say data is objective, but our interpretation of it is subjective. What we filter out is based off of our background, our experiences, our beliefs. So just the example, urban legend, right? You're going to go buy a new car, and let's say you want to buy a white SUV. Everyone's like, you know what? It's crazy. I see so many more white SUVs on the road right now. It's weird. It's like a sign. I'm like, no, it's not a sign. You just told your brain that that's important, so it's not filtering them out. Or when I did this in person, I used to wear like a pink shirt the first day. And then the second day I'd start out and say, how many people saw men wearing a pink shirt? And they'd raise their hand. I'm like, do you think I went around and paid people $10 to wear a pink shirt? No, it's that they were always there. your brain just didn't think it was relevant to you because you didn't at that point care. But by me wearing it, you made it care. So what's going into our brain is filtered based off of that. And then once it's in there, though, the things that do make it, it's looking at kind of like our database to say, what are these different things that have happened in the past and how do I apply those? And it'll output a decision. And it's done unconsciously. So like you're walking on a street, there's a crane at like a skyscraper and someone's lifting a piano up on the crane. Do you sit there and say, let me measure the weather. Let me measure all these different parameters. Will it hurt me? No, you move, you walk to the other side. You don't take time consciously doing that. That is your brain going through this kind of shortcut thing. You can bring it to conscious and think about these things. But at the end of the day, this is why I like AI, because your brain is limited. The things that you're bringing in are filtered. They're based off my experience. And the other thing is, you had mentioned technology is evolving so fast. What's in my brain that happened 2 years ago might not be a relevant thing today. And look at that. Like, it's interesting. You look at things like grandparents, right? They grew up without even TV remotes like mine, right? They had to go to the TV and change the channel with a knob. And then I grew up with remotes, and now you can have like a remote on your phone and stuff. So what's fascinating is like my kids, they pick it up instantly. They're like swipe, swipe, swipe. My parents, they don't. It's because their brain is still remembering, well, where's the knob I turn? I'm like, there's no knob, Dad. It's a swipe. And they're like, what's a swipe? The kids don't have that old mental model. Their database is clean. So like, oh, this makes sense. It's intuitive, swipe, swipe, swipe. And it's just a good example with data, all of this information, all this evidence. It can be biased, right? Because we're making decisions that could be outdated. We're making decisions that align with what we think is important, which may not be the right answer.
I mean, I love that you use multiple generations going through different sets of technologies and habits. Like the old generation, definitely my mom's generation, yeah, they were used to, antennas,
Antennas, yeah.
I was she talked about that, and sadly, I experienced a little bit as a kid because that was still some of her mindset. So, as someone who went through that transition, I think I have a unique perspective because we kind of like went leaps and bounds. We used to be ahead, then we fall behind. It's weird. I don't recommend using my story as a template because it's weird as heck if I'm going to be nice about it. I still use the remote. I've programmed my phone to be remote, but I just find it so weird. I just find it very weird for me. My phone's about to be burnt. I think my phone is so overwhelmed by putting out 100 different apps in there.
Yeah.
Machine overwhelmed. So I got to be more compassionate to my machine right there. I know it sounds weird. I like that because the elder generations used to knobs, and they're still thinking, some modern stuff. They're trying to look for that knob. I think if the kids, I'm sure they'll be able to adapt a bit quicker, but they're going to be freaked out because the swipe is not going to work. They got to get used to turning that knob. So, because they're both filtered by their habits, what they are, what they're experiencing. So that's a very, very good example. Yeah, we're very pattern oriented. We pay attention to what's important to us. Yep. And for me, I'm going to pay attention to chart number 8. It looks like a colored Pac-Man. It looks like Pac-Man to me. The rest look very boring. Who cares? It look like stock market. I don't want to pay attention to that. That gives me anxiety. Who cares? I don't want to pay attention to that data. So we filter things. So we filter things out based on what we think is relevant and what we like, and say culture, beliefs, background, life experiences, our opinions. Shapes all that. So that's of course that forms different biases. What forms, the one I like to use is confirmation bias. That's you see, I pay attention to data 8 more because data 8 proves me right. Data 5, the data set 5, that's irrelevant. Who cares? And it's going to double down on, especially in politics. That's such a big thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Then I say, you see, if you didn't do this, migrants would be done. Or probably, no, if you didn't do this, terrorists wouldn't be coming in. So there's already a huge conflict based on immigration. So far, that's the hottest issue right now. And confirmation bias is just through the roof. That's why I'm using that as an example. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about politics. We take a little break from that. We talk about data analytics, the psychology of it. That's more important. So it's a transition from that. I got this as a 4th question, but I think this is a more relevant question. I think just to start it off, what is cognitive and implicit bias?
Yep. So they're related, and you can even use them as synonyms. I like to separate them a little bit, but just in general, bias is We talked about the brain. It filters in the inputs. It is a computer. It's a pattern matching machine. But due to factors like you're tired, so your brain, like think of the computer like it's overheating. When you have a time crunch, like you have to make a decision quickly. When you don't have all the information. So imagine, again, think of a database where you're trying to make an answer, but there's data missing. Now, all these things pretty much happen every day, every minute, every decision. There is no situation I've ever been in where they said you can take as long as you need, even if it's years. I'm going to make sure you have all the data that you have. And it's not going to be anything that's emotionally tied to your decisions. So all these things, the emotions, the time, speed, the number of data, the brain is thinking about the decision, and we think we're making a rational decision, but we're taking a shortcut. So you mentioned confirmation bias. It's not intentional. It's not malicious. It's the way the brain is filtering. So it's like, okay, I have a hypothesis. I think that company A is great. And then I go in the newspaper and I start reading articles, which is data. And one of the articles, the first one says, company A is great. It's like a great place. My brain says, look, those two things connect. My thoughts and theirs, boom. I'm never going to hear anything about company B being bad. And you might actually see it in the paper, but your brain doesn't process it. It's filtered out. So the confirmation bias is whatever you're thinking, our brain tends to find data that proves it and information and tries to avoid data. Now, it's called cognitive bias because it's kind of the way the brain works. It's kind of like the faulty reasoning. Implicit bias is done the same way, but usually an implicit bias is not a decision like, do I like this company? Do I work for this company? Do I buy this stock? Do I, go on this vacation? It's usually a stereotype. It's like, okay, perfect example. I was growing up and the neighbor 2 houses down had kids, and one of the kids always would run around. You remember BB guns, right? Like they're guns, but they're not like bullet guns. They're like little BBs. Go around and one day shot my parents' Windows house. My parents were really mad. Very nice parents, but they got mad. And the kid had red hair. And growing up, I'm always like, redheads, those troublemakers, those BB guns. And then I'd see a couple movies. I think there was a movie with John Ritter called Problem Child, and the kid had red hair. So my whole life, implicitly, I'm not against redheads, but I would see someone that had red hair, and I would be like, unconscious, there goes a troublemaker. Yep. And this impacts work. Like you're recruiting, you're trying to hire. Imagine if that's happening and you can't stop it. Well, then the long story short, I have 4 kids. My third one came out more hair on his head than I have, and it was flaming orange. I'm like, well, wait a second. Redheads can't be bad. That was what my brain needed to trigger me and say, like, well, time out. You're implicitly telling everyone you've seen in the past 40 years that has red hair, they're bad people because of one experience with a 9-year-old 30 years ago. So when you start associating with things, it's sometimes called implicit bias. And there's actually tests that you can do online through Harvard that let you to see if you like have an implicit bias toward different protected classes and so forth. So it's the same mechanism. It's the brain filtering things out that are relevant for making a decision so that you don't end up stereotyping or discriminating against people.
Try that kind of stereotyping with a different skin color. There, the crowd's about to say, "Oh, Kevin is a racist." And this is why I don't take people who say racist very seriously anymore. And that's been my confirmation bias until after the fact, because they use that word so much, even though people that I know they mean, they may say they may have said a racist statement. Are they a racist person? No, it's probably just a one-off moment. Exactly. But now you're just labeling that, and say some of the crowds, I mean, in a massive context, if you would have just said, oh, it's a dark-skinned kid doing that, they could have just assumed that you're a racist, and that's their crowd's confirmation bias. Mine is more based on how articulate the person sounds. They're articulate, I think they're smarter. Mm-hmm. But it took me time, and it took me college, so I was like my mid-20s, just to say, wow, so many people got degrees are articulate. They sound smart, but they're not really smart. When I ask them a good question, they just get stumped. And they don't open the door, they drop things, they they can't do basic things. Is what is going on here? And of course, a lot of people don't like their biases being challenged. It makes uncomfortable. Got to admit that you're wrong. You've been carrying that wrong, faulty belief for such a long time. I'm happy I got over that because I know people with master's degree that they can't write for jack. A fifth grader is better than them in writing. So yeah, master's degree. I am not being dramatic. I have seen a few writings of people who got a master's degree. I said, wow. I don't know. I think you need to go back to get your refund. I have to be honest. I don't know where you're gonna get your money back, but you need it bad because I don't know. This is just unbelievably terrible. The only grace I have left is I'm keeping that person anonymous. Yeah, it's because I don't want to embarrass them. It's not just one person; it's a few of them with a master's. Yeah. They can't write. And one bias, easy bias. Oh, they got a master's degree. They're gonna knock it off the park. Their writing's gonna be close to perfect. No, sometimes reality is scary. It's really scary. It's like with the redhead example. What's funny? I even had that bias a little bit. I said, "Oh God, the guy." I hate to say it. Movies made it worse. They didn't help. Yes. They made it worse. They may not be the cause of it, but they definitely enforced that. And I used to think, oh, redhead kids were even evil. We'll go a step further. And in the blonde, I used to think the blonde ones were either just too arrogant and stupid. So I'll even take it a step further. And listen, people. You say, "Oh my God, you got such horrible thinking." Trust me, you do too.
Exactly.
Okay, don't judge us. At least we are open and honest about it. Okay, yeah, you go. The thing about you, listener, is you have privacy to think about it. You can keep that to yourself, improve your behavior, and probably leave no traces of that. Okay, that's all I can say to you. Don't judge if you don't have the general picture.
Well said.
That's all I'm gonna say. Because I'm also people say, "Oh, I don't like redheads and blondes." So, well, today I think that's very stupid. If I went back in time and talked to past me, I was, hey, come here. I probably would have confirmed. I would have debunked those biases right there.
Yeah.
But we all go through this. This is part of being human. And look, I'm a Christian, and even Christians, we gotta admit, we're not perfect. We try to act perfect. Trust me, we be brought down real quick. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to say about that. So at least Kevin and I are honest.
Yes.
That's it. I mean, if you want to add your 2 cents, there's just, add it, just comment. Feel free to even feel free to judge because you're just exposing your own ignorance in the internet. Do that. Let's do that. Or if you're brave, really brave, you comment about how you had your biases and how you overcame that, or what you're doing to overcome that. Okay, that's your little, your chat comment activity right there. Because I know people just love to say stuff, act like they're smarter than thou, and then by the time you expose these people, they're just people living in the basement, not having the best time of their lives. That's a stereotype. Oh, that's another bias right there. Ironically, I will be surprised you're not doing anything better for the most part. I'm just going to leave it at that. So, and then I like this part here because I think that's another problem. Switch from linear to exponential thinking. When I saw that kind of question, I had to take that one because sometimes I got that problem. It has to be A, B, C. I now expect D, but I get all a bunch of weird numbers. What is going on here? What am I missing? Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Then all of a sudden went to 7. So where the heck is 5 and 6?
Yeah.
What's going on here? What am I missing? Is there activity, or you're tricking me, or what? Or is there more than 5 ways to think about this? So how do we switch that?
Yeah. So I guess take a step back. Linear, right? Like you said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sequential. That's how our brains work. A lot of it goes back to how our brains work. It's how we think. You had mentioned earlier, like and I had mentioned as well, the increasing evolution of technology. Technology is evolving exponentially. So if anyone remembers going back to like when COVID started and they talked about flatten the curve, it was an exponential curve, right? It starts small and then it grows dramatically up like a like a hockey stick. So the difference is because technology is going exponentially, the speed of processor, speed of all these things, we too should be able to train our brain to not just think linearly. So what I mean by that is, if, let's say you work in an organization and you're coming up with your strategy for the next year, linear thinking is just like when you mentioned A to B. But think about companies. So think about, I'll use like Uber, right? Uber is a transportation company. A to B would have been, okay, let's figure out how to do a cab that people can share that we own. They skipped all the way to, okay, let's build a transportation company and let's not own any cars. Or like Airbnb, let's do the next innovation of a hotel, but let's not own any physical buildings. That's exponential thinking. So it's not just keeping up with technology, it's training your brain to not just think what's next, because again, that's how it works. Like, what are we doing tomorrow? What's happening here? What's my next step with my fitness? But we want to think exponentially ahead. How do we do this? How do we get over that? And it's amazing. They will do very different experiments with different age people. Like they'll show different sizes of pizzas and they'll ask them, which one is bigger. And we always pick the ones that are smaller because they look linearly bigger. They're the bigger pizzas versus like 3 or 4 of the smaller ones. So I guess the takeaway is to kind of keep up with people that want to say, okay, I want to get a new job. I want to innovate. I want to do something with my life. I want to do these things. It's easy for me to say, okay, we'll start thinking exponentially. But what I want them to say is, to your point, like, just be humble, like realize there's more for you to learn. And I call it intellectual humility. Like, you're not just going to get through the next big breaking point and become the CEO of a company by just looking at something and then saying, okay, I'm going to just tweak it. Like, think differently. That's how we've come up with a lot of our innovations over the past decade, is this thinking outside the box, using things that are designed for something else than what they are, and thinking exponentially.
I would say even go bonkers out of the whole traditional linear thinking, if you will. I mean, who would have thought? I still don't understand the concept of WeWork, how that still functions even after the seat
Yeah.
was not so. I think was that you kind of rent your own office space. I still don't fully understand it, but hey, that was innovative. That was a well, I guess it's still a thing. You got still see people use rent, I think, spaces, and different people use them cubicles. Not just one person in that cubicle. They got times a few months later, it's a different person using that cubicle and it's a different industry. I am not going to pretend I have a full understanding of that. And I think it's a multi-purpose rental, I guess. Yeah, an office temporary rent. Instead of just being in there because your company's in there, you go rent some kind of office space. And I think temporary leasing, temporary lease instead of long-term leasing for 5-10 years. You're there for a few months, and if you no longer need the space because either you're switching your job or it's irrelevant, you can work from home. When COVID pandemic happened, it was first. I mean, most of us had to work from home, especially the non-essential job.
Yeah.
So that definitely pushed us to work more virtually, definitely away from the physical office space. And companies, they're just realizing, oh crap, we could cut an expense almost entirely. Only rent office space. Wow, we could save millions of dollars. I mean, places like Florida, that's a bit different. If anything is hot right now. Places like New York, I still see good amount of office buildings. I'm pretty sure it's more than 50%. It's probably like 60% at this point. I could be wrong. I didn't check the data, so feel free. So listeners, feel free to correct me. Another common activity, correct me if I'm off, I haven't checked the data since, I just know it's more than 50%. It should be. Places like Florida, I'm sure offices are probably at capacity. That's where a lot of companies are moving to, and they are telling people, come to the office. Some CEOs said, no, get your lazy butts out of working from home. You're going back to the office so you can communicate, collaborate with your workers. Certain CEOs is just, you just work from home. Hey, whatever. That's expense for me.
Yeah.
Those are two dueling work philosophies, if you will, that's still being battled out. So that's what I'm going to say about that. It's a little off topic, but talking about innovation and how people's going to work. Can you analyze data while you're working from home? Some could say yes. Some say no. Home is distracting. Pay attention to kids or spouse. I need to go to the office. There are different workers that get distracted working from home more than, and other people some of them just love it.
Yeah.
I can binge on Netflix. I can play music while I'm analyzing data. Maybe I'll come up with certain connections that I couldn't form before. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. And that's definitely exponential thinking, because if you think linear, oh, you got to go to the office during the pandemic. Ooh, I'm sure, look, New York City, even New York State was cracking down some of those people. So yeah, I'm asking about your opinion of the government. That's more the political segment here. I know certain you can't stand it. Me, I'm more of a hybrid if I have my preference, but if I have to go to the office more often, I won't argue with it personally. I'm getting paid by them at the end of the day. If I don't like it, I can just go for a job that's more virtual. That's it. End of story. We have options. This is not the worst economy that America has endured so far. So let's just be absolutely clear about that. So now let's turn this to a positive. We're ready to talk about how it works, what problems we encounter. How can we turn data into wisdom? Maybe that's a good final question for the host.
Yeah, it kind of wraps it all together. We talked about the bias and how things work. What's really fascinating to me is the way that I think we can get the most out of our data. And again, data is not just numbers, it's information, it's evidence, it's text, it's all these things. The number two, I would say the two most important skills would be listening and questioning. And I'll pose a question to the readers. You've probably taken, or the listeners, you've probably taken years, decades of reading and writing classes. Probably haven't taken a listening course. I would dare to say that probably no one listening has ever taken a listening course, but it's the number one communication skill. So how are we supposed to get diverse perspectives? How are we supposed to be, admit when we're wrong, when we don't listen to other people? And the second one is questioning. So I'm a big fan, and they go hand in hand, of politely questioning. Playing devil's advocate. Can you explain this situation more? Because by doing that, you're going to get more diverse perspectives. Going back to what we said about the data is objective, but our narrative is skewed. If I have a skewed perspective, why wouldn't I want to get more perspectives to fill that out and give me a 360 view? And you do that by asking questions and then listening to the responses. I mean, it really isn't more complicated than that. But I've heard people talk about it, how, well, you need to know mathematics, you need to know statistics. No, you need to be able to listen, ask questions, listen, and then be humble enough, to your point, which I love, to admit that they might have a better perspective than you. Let's listen to them.
Yeah, because I think that's another clash I hear from higher ups. One focus on profits more than anything. The other focuses on the customer. No, we need to put more money and resources here. While the one that's focused on profits said, no, 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 no. And just like that, the biases on one is focused on the customer, one is really focused on the people element, one is focused on the profit element, and then there's the one who just wants to shut down conflict, kumbaya as quick as possible. Yeah. Or there could be other perspective, or one just have a self-driven interest that said, no, I want only my team to be acknowledged as being the best because the rest of them are lame. Or there's an ego one. There are different perspectives I throw in there. Some are good representations, some are bad representations, and they're overly simplistic, I'll admit. But I'm not going to get to the nitty-gritty and bore you with all the corporate or leadership politics that do happen when it comes to debating about what are the priorities. That's why it's called competing priorities, because which one's gonna end up on top, and that's what normally is. And sadly, they lose sight. They lose the big picture sight. You do have to improve customer service, because one just keeps saying, customers keep, when they fill a survey, saying that the chat bot doesn't comprehend or answer their questions properly. It gives some gobbledygook, irrelevant response. I know it's not helpful. That'll be one example of poor customer service. Try to use AI for that. And I think AI is not ready for customer service. One of the few areas I think it could do basic at best, like very basic, like process payments. But if there's a problem with a glitch, you still need a human intervention. And I think it's going to take some time for the AI to get there. Because to generate art, of course, AI, great. I love AI with art. I'm not an artist. AI is helping me out with that. It's filling up that gap. See, being humble is to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. It's not putting yourself down constantly. Some people do think that. That's the implicit cognitive bias with that.
Yes.
So just to tie that in there. No, humble is knowing what you're really good at and knowing what you're not so good at. And that's why especially leadership team is more than one person. One is very good with procedures. What's the most efficient way to get it done? One, and that's normally an operations kind of leader. How you get it done the most efficient without breaking the bank, essentially. And then the one who's thinking about the money, the chief financial officer. And there's one thing about just managing people, the chief executive officer, normally. But it gets so intertwined with all these titles that I don't want to bore you listeners or viewers with this. I like what you said right there. You just gotta admit that we don't know everything and just ask for different perspectives and broaden understanding. So, I didn't see that. That's a very good point. So that's hey, he's helping businesses out here. Listeners and viewers, I really hope you're grasping this because in a lot of ways this can be applied to the worker as well. Not just I was talking about the leadership, but it's can apply to the worker easily as well. Because who's gonna get through the nitty-gritty? It's the middle management and then normally the team members. They ones have to do the nitty-gritty. So this is for you as well. What do you filter out normally? What do you filter out? The people that are in the middle, I don't know, or is a certain data that harms your narrative that you're trying to draft? You gotta really think about that because my bias was when I was analyzing data was I ignore the 5% of negative feedback. That was my bias. That's all okay. We got 95. We're very good. We're very good. But that even though it might be a small percentage, but that could be a direction for growth.
Mm-hmm.
But we keep saying it's good, it's good, it's good. Go, I don't know, 5 years from now, we could become stagnant in a rate. It could get worse because we keep thinking we're good. We're good. That 5 could turn to 7%. 10% is wait, what's going on here? Forget stagnation. We're declining here. Why are we getting less positive feedback? What's going on? So we want to be proactive and address that and probably lower that down to that. Well, for me, a good goal will be below 5%. Show that we bounce back and then some. So that will be my bias. Okay, I can just filter this out. This is not really needed. Those 5 people are probably possible to please. And because I have done data work, so a few of them complicated, and that had to deal with money, and then there were some that was just based on surveys, how people liked it, will they recommend it to a friend, if they liked the speaker, how do you feel, the normal quantitative stuff. Sometimes it gets boring for me because we end up just keep doing the same thing, and yep. And I think that's definitely a bias within the organization because that tends to be ignored, even with the higher up. So it's definitely systemic. This is definitely systemic occurrence. Let me just say it like that.
Absolutely.
So let's do a shameless plug-in. I like the plug-in. Let's promote that book and talk about wisdom. I think that's the title of the book as well, Turning Data into Wisdom. Who's your author? I'm not giving you money. It's pretty easy. It's the guess. If you haven't paid attention, it's Kevin Hanegan. Okay. And I like this this simple circular, the cycle that you put here. And all of them start with an A. Okay.
For data. Yeah.
All of them starts with the A. I noticed that right away. I pay attention to linguistic patterns. You can say that's one of my more positive traits. So, and I'm just gonna read it because this is just I can assume it's the tip of the iceberg here. Ask, formulate a focus question. Acquire, search for the best available data. Analyze, critically appraise and analyze the data. Apply, integrate the data with your professional expertise. It goes real fast, so sometimes I might have to just stop. Yep, and be conscious by mental models. Announce, decide, communicate, assess, monitor the outcome, and then that starts all over again. That's why it's a cycle. So I check that out. And the reason why I'm saying that, because once you get to this website, kevinhanegan.com, that's KevinHanegan.com, You don't know this, how you know you made to the right page. You can scroll down a bit. You see Turn to Wisdom Data Book right there. It's a nice blue book. It's pretty simple in colors, and yep, and it also has data literacy to practice as well. So he's not just a one-hit wonder when it comes to products. And I'm assuming that looks like that's more of a workbook. If I'm okay, yeah, that's more of a guide. But yeah, it's good content because data is not going to get smaller or simpler. Okay, it just might be bigger and more wild. So we gotta update our organic computer called the brain.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I'm gonna say about that. Is there anything? Oh well, I'm gonna share his social medias as well. That's what I always do. And is this anything else that they think my listeners should be aware of besides any products or anything?
No, that was pretty thorough. If they're interested, check out the website, check out the book. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yep. All righty then. So with that, let me just do the typical YouTube Rumbler. Yes, I came up with the term Rumbler. I mean, why not? It's an official competitor of YouTube at this point. Like, comment, share, subscribe for YouTubers, or follow for Rumbler to use different terminology. It means the same thing. You can be notified when I post new videos. And then for the audio listeners, if you're paying attention to Apple Podcast or Spotify, or for Spotify, you only can leave a star review. I hope you leave a 5-star review. If not, it's fine. I prefer honesty than blank and fake compliments. I can't really stand that. And then for Apple Podcasts, if I'm not getting a 5-star, at least list your reasons why. And if I get a 5-star, you can list your reasons why as well. I'm going to tell you what to do. Just rate it honestly. And that will actually help me out a lot. So with this lovely episode out of the way, you have a blessed day, afternoon, or night.